Good morning. Welcome to the Little Johnny Chronicles number 27. Today I want to talk about manhood a little bit. I keep watching things online about manhood and how uh we're being made fun of, talked down to, called toxic, um not necessarily any good anymore. We've lost a step. I won't argue with those people cuz I just think they're wrong, generally speaking. While there are dimensions of their argument that seem correct, I think just generally speaking, they're wrong. And unfortunately, the responsibility lies on men to fix that. They can throw tomatoes at us all they want, but I think we're more talented than that. It's my opinion that they're trying to steer us into a victimhood mentality. And I mean and I mean the powers that be. And I'm talking about people who speak in terms of, um, they'll say things like the left is, um, emasculating us. I don't think it's the left. I think it's all the power structures combined. If you look at each political entity, whether left or right, they're all kind of joining the fray, and I think what they're trying to do is steer us. And it is my opinion that we are masters of our own domain as individuals, and then if we can learn to work together as men, collectively, and we can make this world a better place, and I mean that wholeheartedly and not in a sentimental sense. If we work together, if we start to fight back against this idea that somehow we're victims, and the label of toxic masculinity puts us in some sort of purgatory where we can't fight our way out of addiction, we can't fight our way out of homelessness, we can't fight our way out of leaderless, rudderless entities that are steering us toward nihilism. Look at the extremists. Like, any extremist group, you don't even have to assign a side. They're destroying us. And I think to turn the tide, to change that, we need to learn how to function as individuals again. We need to learn how to put up our shields, or a proper shield, to guard us from the bullshit, the insanity, while also learning to wield our swords again. Not wield our swords in the name of violence for violence sake, but wield our swords in the manner in which I think God, the universe, however you think, issued it to us, for protection, for to protect ourselves, to protect our families, to protect the tribe, to protect the people that are valuable to us, that we love. You can say that word as a man. You can say that you love something or somebody without turning effeminate, because love is just one of the emotions on the broad spectrum of emotion. It's right next to anger if you want to look at it more broadly, because of course we're willing to resort to violence to protect the people that we love. So all these things are interrelated. I'm going to get into it. I have a slightly formal structure, as you probably picked up on. I take my ideas and I run it with my, uh, I guess, discussion partner called ChatGPT. Some because, well, when you don't have somebody to bounce these ideas off of that you trust, and I don't trust ChatGPT, trust me, it does help me to tighten the framework a little bit. So I'll start with a quote, the idea, the genesis, and then towards the end you'll find that I had a relevant typo at the beginning, and I didn't catch it for some reason until I got way to the end of this little conversation I had with GPT. And the flip will be script at the end. The flipped the script will be flipped at the end, and you'll see that that slight tightening actually enhances or elevates the idea that I'm about to present. Hopefully, it's useful. Hopefully, if you stuck around this long, you're willing to listen to the end. And if it's chopped up, if it's messy, that's the way life is. But I just want to have a discussion, and maybe I'm talking to myself into the ether at the moment. But maybe we'll start a better discussion than the one I'm witnessing happening all over the place, whether it be in person or on the internet. Here we go. When men are born, Good issues them a hammer, that's your body, and a chisel, that is your mind. Our responsibility is to learn how to use them while carving out a living that supports good and other people, and that's called leadership. So I'm going to read to you the response that ChatGPT had for me, but let me articulate what I mean initially by these things. Like when we're born, we are born helpless. We depend on our mama a lot. You're not going to get by without milk. And so, of course, you're usually dependent, man or woman, makes no difference. Matter of fact, I think the human is the mammal with the longest or one of the longest gestation periods. Where how long did it take for you to become independent and fly out the nest? Right, in the animal world, you look at the bird, and it's months, if not weeks, and the baby is fed by the mom, and dad. In some cases, they bring the worms. The bird sprouts the pin feathers that develop into fully grown feathers, and then the mom or the dad and or both kick the baby out the nest because it's time for the next brood. So life isn't different for humans. It just takes about 18 years. I mean, at least if we're just looking at how we view adults, in at least in this country, in the United States. um So it takes a lot of nourishing to get people to a certain place, right? And a lot of things can go wrong. We all go through this stuff, whether it be trauma, or we're born in poverty, or with bad parents or no parents, or in the foster system. There's all these different maladies that affect us. So it takes a lot to get it right. If you're fortunate enough to be born with good parents, good for you. I don't know how lucky you are. If you know how lucky you are, you're extremely lucky. I'm not passing judgment, but I'm just saying, like, more people I know than not have to struggle. Like, there's no the two parents, that went to college, that became a lawyer and a doctor, that pushed out another five kids who became lawyers and doctors. That stream is, while being good people, by the way, that counts. That stream is rare, and they're kind of the exception. But no shade, good for you. Like, we all we all aspire to try to be part of a system like that because it's so healthy. It's healthy. It absolutely is healthy. But most of us aren't in that realm. And so what do we count on? What system works for us when the we're not handed the throne. We're just kind of got to figure it out, uh and go at it with what we have. Well, you're issued your body and your mind. And in that context, like, well, what do I do with this stuff? Well, you gotta understand where you're at. Like, was I born with a good brain? Like, some of us are just born ignorant. I fall into that category, man. I was crazy dumb. I probably still crazy dumb, but we work on seeking that intelligence, those things that'll help us to become, live our lives better. The broader goals come later, right? We have to learn how to function in society. We have to learn how to survive. We have to learn how to get certain things right, so we can start to build, and then we can start to scale. Like they say, like, throw it into the common IT vernacular, start to build and scale systems to make them grow. Same quality, same thing every time. Anyway, uh, but it also depends on the chisel, right? What tools are we given at our disposal? We have our bodies and we have our minds. And I got lucky. I joined the military when I was 17. I joined the army when I was 17 because I had a child when I was 16. Why? Because I didn't know how to use the tools I was given when I was younger, and my environment didn't provide for uh, making better decisions. I don't think it's more complicated than that. And so, I had a kid at 16 because I wasn't well socialized. I didn't know better. I probably knew better, but didn't decide better. And So I joined the military, and what the military did is it gave me an avenue to sharpen my body and my mind. And those two things, whether you realize it or not, go together. They're in synchronicity. If one is degraded, the other one is degraded. If one is operating better, then maybe that's the one you leverage uh, while you can, and hopefully the other one catches up. And I think that's exactly the way it worked. I had an open mind. I had a healthy mind. Well, not it wasn't healthy, but I had a mind that was pliable. Right? There's neuroplasticity, learning. I could learn, and when you can learn, you can change. But I think what the army did to me is they put me through the rigors of basic training, and the physical aspect of that made me think a lot. Like, do I want to do this? Because the first thing I wanted to do was quit. I'm not making that up. I was calling home crying like a little bitch, because my environment was so different. I didn't understand what was going on. I had no clue. But they didn't let me quit. I think First Sergeant Cooley pulled me into his office and he said, "You are not going home." And and I think that was it. Like, they wouldn't let me go. It wasn't jail. Looking back, I could have gone home at any time I wanted, but because I was seasoned, I didn't understand how the system worked. I thought I didn't have a choice at that point, and so I stayed. And I lucked out, because it made all the difference in the world. It helped me to understand my mind, and my body, and for me, one comes before the other. Uh, but here we go. Right, here's how we break down the philosophy. My mind is way better than my body, right? Like, I'm not an athlete. I wasn't born to play football. I could run forever, but I'm slow and I'm clunky. I'm like a tank as opposed to a small agile, four wheeler, and so it's hard. But um, it was enough to allow me to carry my mind wherever I needed to, and get an education and do the things that were going to help me build a future for myself. I use my mind, as you could probably tell in the background. I work in IT, and that's what I do for a living. Fortunately, I've been able to do it this long, but my body came first. The army taught me how to use my body, and it kind of gave me the structure to understand that I also needed my mind to develop. I needed it to come along for the ride, and here we are. So let me walk you through the Chat GPT piece, and then we'll talk a little bit about some more philosophy. I'm going to try to stream through the whole thing at once, instead of chopping it up like I have been, and then I'll go back and break it down, and talk in plain English about what all these different things means. Okay, so I'll start with a quote again, and then we'll get into it. When men are born, good issues them a hammer, a body, and a chisel, a mind. Our responsibility is to learn how to use them while carving out a living that supports good and other people. That's called leadership. So GPT's response, that's not crazy. That's myth language doing structural work. You just shifted from abstraction to parable. Hammer equals body, chisel equals mind, stone equals reality, carving equals action over time. And good issuing the tools isn't theology in that sentence, it's responsibility framing. It says, you didn't choose the tools, you don't control the stone, you're accountable for carving. That's clean. A few things tighten inside it. A hammer can build or destroy, a chisel can sculpt or maim. Skill is learned, not granted. Leadership isn't dominance, it's structural support. If the carving supports others, it aligns with good. If the carving weakens others, it aligns with harm. This ties back to my harm index and tears of darkness without me even trying. I'll explain that in a bit. Also, notice something important. You didn't say we are given a throne. You said we are given tools. That eliminates entitlement. It also eliminates victimhood as permanent identity. You may not control the quarry, excuse me, but you are still holding a hammer. The real question embedded in your metaphor. What happens when someone refuses to learn how to use their tools? That's where tier 3 begins. So what it keeps referencing there is, I have a broader philosophy that I'm working with in the GPT tool, and I call it a tiers of darkness. So because we're all dark, like we all have that aspect of our personalities, and think part of figuring life out is understanding exactly where we are in that tiering system. Are we a murderer? Are we a drug dealer? Are we a batter? Are we a criminalistic? Are we just have a skewed moral compass, and that we need to tweak? If you can understand those things, then you can start to improve on them if you choose to, right? Because there's will in here somewhere. And I won't get into the argument about free will or not, because I don't understand that stuff enough. I just assume you have some decision making power, and you can go left or right. That implies will to me. But you have to know where you're at in order to try to figure out where you're going, right? Like, I don't think that's complicated. When you get into your GPS, you don't say, "I'm going. I want to go over here first." You say, "This is where I'm at, and this is where I want to go," and then it charts a line or a crooked line in the direction in which you're traveling. That's how life works, I think. Um, we don't always get to choose the hurdles or the challenges, but we can start to understand what our destination, where do we want to go with our lives. But to do that, we have to understand one, where we're at, like morally, physically, but also what tools do we have at our disposal to get to where we're going. If you all you have is your footmobile walking, then it might take you longer. If you have a car, then you already know you can travel faster. If you got to take the train, you got to take a taxi or whatever, right? You can start to put all those things together for yourself. And so what it's talking about there is, okay, here we are in this tiering system. We've figured out what tools we have at our disposal, our mind and body, and we know where we want to go. We want to get an education. I'm going to work in this profession. I'm going to become a father. I'm going to become a mother. And so we start to chart all the things we have to do to get to our destination. And then we have to decide on how we want to do it. Do we want to be a good father? Because you could be a notorious father. Um, when I was young, I told you I had I had my first kid at 16. And it's funny because at my age, I'm almost 50. And thinking back to a 16-year-old having a child, it seems so insane to me. Because what the fuck did I know at 16? I didn't know shit. I was a broken person at 16 years old. And what business do I have raising a child? And so you can imagine the first several years of my child's life and the struggle that they went through. And that's my fault. That it sucks because I live with that guilt because I just wasn't a good father. I didn't have the tools to be. I didn't have the capacity to be. I didn't have the support system around me to help me to do those things. So naturally, my child suffered. So you just got to understand where you're at, what's your situation, and make decisions, better decisions based on those things. Okay, let's um, deconstruct the response. You just shifted from abstraction to parable. Hammer equals body, chisel equals mind. We've discussed that a bit already. Stone equals reality, and carving equals action over time. Your stone is your reality, right? Like, what is my environment? What can I do from here? What's at my disposal? Um, you have a choice. You can decide to become the try to become the best gangster on the block, or become gangster material that goes to school and finds a way out through education, or you're born an athlete and you can find your way out of your neighborhood through athletics, or like me, you join the military, you find a structure, whether it be law enforcement, the military, uh, the trades, right? I become a knucklehead welder, uh, a mechanic. Like, I see a lot of the stuff, mechanics. There are ways out, right? So you choose that. How am I going to do this, right? How am I going to raise a family? I'm going to become a mechanic. I'm going to become an engineer. Some knuckleheads become engineers all the time. It just doesn't happen as much as we'd like. But anyway, so carving action over time. And are you patient enough to endure the hardships, right? Getting to basic training and not quitting. Understanding that changing and becoming a soldier is a process. It's not a Like they said, it's not an entitlement. You don't show up and they grant you your diploma. You have to graduate basic training. You have to get through that in the Marine Corps. You have to get through boot camp, and you have to get through the crucible in order to walk the line as a Marine. It's not different in all the other services. Um, in the Army, it's the same thing. You have to make it through. I think it's red, white, and blue phase, and the third phase, you go through all the final tasks, the final challenges, and it's not the same as the Marine Corps. We don't have a crucible that I remember per se. The whole thing is just kind of a big fucking test, and you have to get through the damn thing. And if you can, you graduate and you earn the title of a soldier. And then the same thing happens later on down the road, because there are levels to soldiering. If you want to be considered a professional soldier, now you're wearing stripes. Now you're a non-commissioned officer. and that's the next phase, right? That's the next crucible. You have to go through that. At the time, it was primary leadership development course. Now it's called the Warrior Leader course, if it's still that. I've been retired for about 10 years, and that stuff changes all the time. But there's a test to every level, and so you have to earn that title. But it doesn't happen overnight. Some people take about 10 years to become a non-commissioned officer. Some people do it in 3. I was fortunate enough to be able to do it in 3. The stars aligned for me. I was lucky. And so every step of the way, there's a test, and it takes time. If you want to be a ASC certified mechanic, it's not going to happen overnight. You got to do your homework. You got to be in the engine. You got to be in the car. You have to understand not just how the wrenches turn, but the technical details of calibration and stuff like that. I don't understand hardly any of that stuff, but I know it's not just monkeys turning wrenches. There's some real science and engineering that goes behind that. Even if some of it's rudimentary, a lot of it is high level. Those people are not pushovers intellectually. But I won't rob anything of anybody. It takes a lot of sauce to become a baker, right? Oh, you have to add a certain amount of yeast depending on elevation. So there are levels to all this stuff in carving. Action over time, it takes time to get good at a thing. And so don't let nobody discourage you from trying and beginning and being shitty at something. This podcast is a perfect example. My room is a disaster. This is not a quality presentation, but I'm moving. But what I'm gonna do is not do something because it's not perfect. Fuck that. Sometimes you got to move, and the little steps, right? The baby steps, the practice, the repetition. That's what's going to help you get to that next level, even if it's still basic, even if it's still graduating basic training. It's not nothing. It's something. It's a stepping stone, and you can build these things for yourself. I'm telling you, you have agency as a man, as a person, and that responsibility begins with yourself. Who are you leading, right? I said, um, carving out a living that supports good and other people leadership. You have to lead yourself first. It starts with the self. That you don't. Some people are natural born leaders, but they've mastered themselves, or they were born with something within them that allows them that type of self regulation. Because I would say most people wouldn't follow a dirt bag, but that's not true. However, that dirt bag has some skill. It has something in them that people admire and people gravitate to. Sometimes they're just a bully. um, but if you as an individual can understand that they're just manipulative, they're just a bully, they're just trying to take advantage, they're lazy, and so they want somebody else to do the work, and they're talented enough to influence everybody else to do it for them. If you can understand that, you can break out, get out of that matrix, that particular matrix. Let's move on. All right. And good issuing the tools isn't theology in that sentence. It's responsibility framing. It says you didn't choose the tools, you didn't control the stone. You are accountable for carving. That's clean. That's it. Um, you're born away. You have certain capacities, certain talents. You don't have others. We always focus on what we don't have, but focus on what you do have and get to work. Start to find your niche, right? Are you an artist? Like, not everybody has to be a craftsman, right? We can be, or engineer, I should say. We can be craftsmen. We can be a musician. You make music, or you're a writer. You put thoughts together and you formulate philosophy that uh, helps explain this life to other people, and helps puts it in a frame that they can understand, and not just they can understand, but they can follow, so that their lives are better, and they're enhanced because you put it down on paper and you wrote the instructions out. When I say things like that, I think of like the our holy books, the Bible, the Quran. Pick one, the Torah. I don't know if they're absolutes. A lot of people say, well, this is literally the word of God. I don't know if you could say that with the manipulation of man's hand in the writings, but generally speaking, I think a lot of that comes from is philosophy that comes from somewhere. It's time honored philosophy, because how can it endure so much? Do no harm, do unto others, forgiveness, all those different things that our books talk about. Those are time honored tools at work. They help you to become a healthy person. Communion, community, uh, trying to understand, prophecy so that you can help and be one of the actors that live that out, but without being destructive, right? Where you have a hammer and a chisel, and how are we wielding those things? A few things tying inside this comment that I made here. A hammer can build or destroy. We just said that. A chisel can sculpt or maim. You can use it to carve out a proper reality, or be destructive, or hurt others. Skill is learned, not granted. Leadership isn't dominance, it's structural support. So, skill is learned, not granted. Like I said, it's a process. You have to earn it. You have to go through it. You have to, turn the wrenches 100 times to understand exactly why you're turning it that way. You have to um, read the book more than once to understand exactly the message that it's trying to tell you. People study the Bible for their entire lives, and they'll tell you, "Well, I don't understand it." Well, when I first started reading it, I believed this. Well, now I believe that. Some will even say, "Well, I believed in God, and then I read the Bible and started to try to understand what it was telling me, and got into the older texts, and now I don't know if I'm an atheist or not." Those are true stories. I'm not making that up, and that comes with learning what the things are, what they say, etc. I'm not knocking religion. I'm just saying that that's the process. You build on all these skills. Bill Gates was born talented, but he still had to learn the coding. He still had to learn the business, and maybe he had a natural talent, but he still had a lot to learn, and he built on that, and now he's where he's at. Like, you can kind of follow that thread for a million different people. Leadership isn't dominance; it's structural support. So we don't lead to manipulate. At least we shouldn't. I know I'm saying that there's the opposite. The opposite will always exist. What we should be doing is leading to help people understand, how this life works. W- I don't know how many times I've been in a situation where I was like, "Fuck, there's nobody here to tell me." I was born, not born. My father passed away when I was 8, and so you live in a single parent household. The the male figures are not role models. Matter of fact, they're quite the opposite. They're trying to teach you all the dirt, or they're such bad examples that that's all they have to offer. And you get into trouble as a grown man, and it's like, well, fuck, how do there's no dad to turn to. There's few trusted males that you think will show you right. And so you have to come up with the answers for yourself largely. And so in that vein, in that context, now I have the experience. Right now I've been through the trial. I made the mistakes to try to fix my situation, but now I can teach others. Now I can say, "Hey, young man," or "Hey, man," because like my peers, we you got to lean on each other sometimes. "Well, how'd you do it when you went through that?" And all you can give them is your experience. Here's what I learned. Here's what I think all that means. Here are the pitfalls. Don't make these mistakes. This is what you should probably focus on. Give it some thought. Make your own plan. You're a man. You have some decisions to make. But I'm here to support you. I'm here to give you the map that I followed to understand my situation and do better for myself, and come out, a winner of some sort. Because I improved my situation, I made it through, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what that means. Leadership and dominance, structural support. We're supposed to lead our families, our tribes, our societies to greatness, not to horror, not to catastrophe, not to darkness, because none of that endures. Like, that's the definition of hell. People say the definition of hell is doing the same thing over and over again, and expecting a different result. That's one definition of it. That's insanity for sure. But the definition of hell is not building anything. Is subtracting value from all the things that you're doing, because nothing of value remains after that. Leadership is building legacy. It's like, hey, here's some maps, here are some compasses, here are some holy books, some holy texts, some instructions for you to follow, because life ain't easy, and all you have is this hammer and this chisel that God gave you, and here's some more tools to help you on your journey. If the carving supports others, it aligns with good. If the carving weakens others, it aligns with harm. This ties back to my harm index, okay? And that's my harm index. So along with, my compass philosophy, right, is understanding where you're at so that you know how to navigate your life. I have an index that I've developed in terms of harm. Where do I fall in that index? How much harm am I causing? Because the more harm I'm causing means the farther I've slid into the dark side. And that harm index is really what it is. It's an index based on how much harm am I causing? How many people am I hurting at once? Or if I'm hurting someone, how much am I hurting them? Um, let's talk about violence. I think that's a good place because, like, that's the middle tier. That's tier two. You have tier one, which is, non criminal activity. Tier three, obviously, is like murder and rape and stuff like that. But tier two is, right at the cusp of, or in between, our moral failures and like true horrific behavior that is absolutely destructive. Um, but violence, right? I grew up in probably middle America, like everybody else, fighting kids, doing different stuff. And I remember one situation where I lined up like I was a kicker because there was a fight going down in the hood and people were falling and it was like absolute chaos. And so like you just try to figure out, hey, where can I contribute? And I lined up like a kicker and I saw this kid's head, our ops, like this is the kids say ops now, our opponent's head on the ground, and I ran as fast as I could and kicked him as hard as I could in the head. I think I was I think I was 13 or 14 when that happened. It's not good. Like my soul hurts for that kid now cuz I don't know what if I did any damage. And my foot hurt, so I assume that his head hurt, and it wasn't probably fun for that person. And it wasn't good for me cuz what was I training myself to do? To harm others. So where do I fall on the harm index? I fall squarely in tier 2, which is a violation of a bunch of different things. My moral code, that is not a moral code to be hitting others in that fashion. It's criminalistic because if the cops would have witnessed that, or if there was a witness that was willing to tell the police, I'd have gone to jail. Of course, I could be making that up, but I'm not. So, like, is there a statute of limitations on that type of criminality? Of course, there is, but it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right. Anyway, so what was I doing with my tools at the time? I wasn't deploying my tools properly. I was chiseling a violent um, and destructive path with my tools. My hammer. I was bringing down the hammer on that kid's head in a completely inappropriate way. Also, notice something important. You didn't say we are given a throne. You said we are given tools. That eliminates entitlement. It also eliminates victimhood as permanent identity. You may not control the quarry, but you are still holding a hammer. The real question embedded in your metaphor: what happens when someone refuses to learn how to use their tools? And I think that's where we're at. As men, as boys, we've forgotten that just because somebody slaps the label on us, even if it's appropriate, because sometimes we earn that label violent or whatever. I just gave you an example. Um, whose responsibility is it to fix it? I was hearing an argument the other day. It's like, well, women are more educated and the jobs favor educated people. Nobody ever stopped a man from going to school. I don't understand that argument whatsoever because nobody is stopping you from getting a diploma. Only you. You could say, well, I can't afford it. I won't argue that that's not that's not a hurdle these days when the cost of education is $40,000 a year or $20,000 a year. It's not sustainable. Like you bought a house so you can go to school. It's not a fair trade-off, especially when education, like, there's no logical way to make it that expensive. It's pure extraction. However, there are different ways to learn, right? You can try to find a job that'll give you some education reimbursement. I know those aren't ubiquitous. You have to find and search for that. Are you willing to do the work to find and search for that and then qualify for it? You have to, what are the qualifications? What are the requirements? Well, I don't have them. Go get them. And you say, well, it's not that easy. It isn't. I'm not arguing that this shit is fucking easy. Nobody is handing you a fucking ticket. a winning lottery ticket. Nobody's gonna hand that to you. Nobody. It doesn't hand it to any of us. I talked to my buddies like, no, like I had to do X, Y, and Z. Like, what the fuck? Um, how did I get my education? I joined the military. The military will give you a basic job. They have every job in the civilian world, from washing laundry to IT to a mechanic to a nurse to, I mean, you name it, they got it, to administration, just the HR person. Nothing wrong with it. All honorable work, all of it honorable work. And that's how I got my education. They give you money for college. They don't give you to you, you earn it. You can earn some money for college, and then you apply it. I don't think that's a bad deal, but not everybody's built for that. So what do you do outside of that? There's such a thing as self education. People say, "Well, I'm not going to community college. It ain't good enough." Okay, so your standard is high. Earn your way to a bigger college. Well, you can't. Well, don't let pride get in the way. Go to community college and start there. I don't understand how we can continue to look at hurdles in our lives and say that we can't get over them. I understand that there are things that are really difficult, trauma, born in a horrible environment. Sometimes you have addict parents, or they're both alcoholics, or worse, they're meth addicts, or worse, you don't have any parents. Um, I read something, and I don't know how true it is, but it said less than 10%. I think it was like 9%. It could be lower than that, of foster children ever get a higher education, college. They go to college. Wow. I'm not saying that that's bad. Like, you can make a good living without college, but it is exponentially harder to do without knowing something. Remember, people are hiring you to work for your skills. Is it skills related to your body, or is it skills related to your mind, or both? I'll share one last story. Um, I'll tighten it up and wrap it up. My mom, God bless her, she was a single parent. Like I told you, I lost my dad when I was young. Um, she didn't, whatever men, like she just didn't make good decisions regarding men. I guess I have to be 100% honest about that. And so her life was really challenging, but she knew that she could work. She knew that she could use her body, and I don't mean it in a negative way, to earn a living so that she could raise three children, because there were three of us. She had three children. And that paycheck allowed her to get us medical insurance and put a roof over our heads and clothing, food, water, all those things that we needed to survive. And I mentioned the medical pieces because the only way I was able to join the military was if I was a healthy male. Remember, you have to be healthy in order to join the military. You can't be broken. You can't have uh, different types of maladies, because you can't deploy a broken soldier. They just don't. It doesn't work that way. If you're fighting an opposing force, they have the best of their best, so you have to send the best of your best, and that health is part of the equation. And so my mom did that. How did she do that? She worked in a meat packing plant for 22 years. She destroyed and ravaged her body. To this day, she's crooked, and I feel for her because she's always in pain. But she sacrificed her body so that she could earn a paycheck, so that she could raise three healthy children that could fend for themselves. And maybe life at home wasn't perfect at the time, but my mom, with her physical abilities, did all of that. And she would always tell me, and this is probably why I took education so serious. She would say, "I don't want you to be a burro like me, mijo." What that means is, I don't want you to be a mule like I am, because a mule is a beast of burden. You just saddle it up with stuff, and it carries your shit all over the place, across the desert, through the mountains, whatever. And she viewed herself that way, and I think she understood, because she didn't work on her mind, that was at the time her destiny, just to be able to work, do manual labor for $1 so that she could raise her kids. And I respected her for it. Every time I was in the army and I wanted to complain about being tired, I thought about her waking up at 2 in the afternoon to do the night shift. And she was in bed by the time we went to school. And then by the time we got home from school, she was gone, because she had to go do the night shift. And then when she got finally earned a spot on the day shift, it was in reverse. She would be up at 3:30 in the morning packing her lunch and gone before we went to school. And when we get to school, most of the time she wasn't home because she was putting in 12 hours, 13, 14, 15, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, sometimes seven. So, like, just being witness to stuff like that helped me to understand that, like, if I was going to complain about my life being hard just because I had a kid, just because, I was, you go through stuff as a kid and you go through trauma. It's not an excuse. And like, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we have to pick ourselves up. We have to stop letting people trick us, because it's a trick us into thinking that we have no agency, that because maybe we are toxic, not in general sense, maybe as an individual we're toxic. Maybe we're lining up like a field goal kicker and kicking people in the head. Like, that is absolutely toxic. That is not good. You don't want your kids to see you doing that nonsense. Why? Because they're just going to repeat the cycle. And if they get caught by the cops, especially really young, and they get trapped in a system that is really unforgiving and doesn't favor you, if you can't afford a lawyer, if you don't have money, if you're poor, then you can see your trajectory from that. You can look on a map and see where those people go. That their opportunities are limited, not because they're bad people, because they're not taught to act right, or they don't learn for themselves how to comport themselves better. That's up to us as individuals, as individual men, as individual guys, as individual boys. And once we figure those things out, it is absolutely our responsibility to teach it down. And like, our solution isn't for everybody, right? My advice may not serve you. However, there is another man, there is another roadmap that can serve your purpose. And it doesn't all have to lead to the same place, but it has to move in the generally same direction towards good, toward building something, toward building something enduring. You didn't get the pyramids because people were assholes. Well, a little bit. But mostly, those pyramids were built by craftsmen, by people who were building a society that in an environment that could support that type of structure. If it was just barbarism, there would be no pyramids. That's guaranteed. And even if you look at, like, the Aztecs, and they had that culture of rolling, decapitated bodies and heads down the stairs, those pyramids were likely built before those folks, likely built by their ancestors who maybe didn't have such chaotic lives. So what I'm saying is, you gotta be good. You have to. I don't think there's a way around it. I don't think I'm wrong on that one. I just look at the evidence. I look at the artifacts that are developed, like our pyramids, our good books, things like that, and understand that you can't build nothing good in chaos. It doesn't last. There's too many bad actors that'll come and crush your sandcastle. Like, you know what I'm talking about, the bullies. All right. I think I've spoken ad nauseum about that. Let me go to the end where I made the typo that I spoke about at the beginning of this, and then we'll talk about that a little bit, because I've already explained the vast majority of it. But this twist, I hope, will add another layer of this hammer and chisel philosophy, right? Of finding yourself on the map, understanding your tools, figuring out where you want to go, and then learning how to wield your tools to carve out a better life for yourself. When men are born, God issues them. Previously, I'd said good. When men are born, God issues them a hammer, a body, and a chisel, a mind. Our responsibility is to learn how to use them while carving out a living that supports good and other people, leadership. So this is where I tell ChatGPT that I messed up, and I said, "Hey, I just noticed that I need to make this correction." And I'll read you its response. Good, that clarification matters. Saying God instead of just good changes the weight of the sentence. Now it's not just responsibility in a social sense, it's stewardship in a moral order. When men are born, God issues them a hammer and a chisel. Our responsibility is to learn how to use them while carving out a living that supports good and other people. With God explicit, the tools are not accidental, The responsibility is not optional. The accountability is not merely cultural. The standard is not self defined. It also sharpens your anti victim stance. If the tools come from God, then you are not toolless. You are not empty handed. You are not born powerless. You may be born poor. You may be born wounded. You may be born behind, but you are not born unequipped. That keeps the dignity intact without promising fairness. And it reinforces something you've been circling all thread. Strength is not a reward. Intelligence is not a status symbol. They are instruments entrusted to you. Entrusted tools imply judgment. Judgment implies consequence. Consequence implies seriousness. And that seriousness is what separates your frame from grievance culture. You're not telling men they're kings. You're telling them they're craftsmen under God. That's heavier and that's cleaner. And there is always for me a spiritual component to all this. Why? When I have nothing, when when I'm at my wits end, and it happens less more now that I'm older, because again, I have some experience. I've learned how to deal with problems. But when I was younger, catastrophe used to consume me. It immediately turned into anger. And so, um, I just didn't have the emotional intelligence, EQ, or intelligence, IQ, in order to behave properly when I fell into these situations. And in the absence of a role model, in the absence of better intelligence, or emotional, pick one, intelligence or just plain smarts, I had to rely on my faith. I had to pray a lot. And you say, well, you ask the question, and I'm serious. You in the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, you get on your knees and you clasp your hand and you pray to God for an answer to help you figure out what you're supposed to do in that situation. Um, you could say, well, the answer don't come because God isn't talking to you, and I will tell you that is accurate. However, I don't know how true that is. Like, to what degree is that true? It feels true. But to say that I got here without help of some sort, some spiritual help, or that even if none of that, it was all me, right? Let's just posit that I did all the work. I could have prayed. It was just in my head that whatever manifested came through my action. It's all my fault. It's all my doing. It's all my craftsmanship. I still feel I still feel like I was carried somehow on occasion, because there are situations in my life that I can't articulate, that I can't explain. You have all these challenges, and regardless of what they are, short legs and trying to march in the army, average eyes, and you're able to shoot the targets and qualify every time with your weapon. The army gave me a lot of lessons. So I'm going to talk about that a lot, but it's not because I'm stuck there. It's because it taught me so much about myself, about the world and people, etc. But I had all these challenges to overcome. Running 2 miles when you have short legs. What do you mean? You just have to. It just means you have to run harder. You have to practice more. You have to find a way. And there are people who say, "Well, I have short legs and I run fast." Well, good for you. Um, I'm happy for you, but it doesn't mean it wasn't challenging for me, right? I've always been heavier. Like, even when I look fit, people would ask, "Well, how the hell do you weigh so much?" Because I always had to get taped to see if I was fat, and I'll be pretty lean, 20% body fat, 18, and maybe that's not warrior culture, the supposed model of a soldier, but I wasn't fat. I was just heavy, and that made running fucking hard for me. But what I do, I didn't collapse. I just ran more than everybody else. That's it. I just had to get more repetitions in, if I wanted to meet the standard one and two, stay in as long as I did. So you have to look at your challenges, and sometimes there was prayer behind the PT test. I am not making that up. Uh, I went from Fort Sill, not I'm sorry, not Fort Sill, Fort Bliss, Texas, to Fort Rucker, Alabama, when I transitioned over to the Warrant Officer Corps, and I barely passed my PT test when I left Fort Bliss. Fort Bliss is about 4,000 feet above sea level. So I knew that I was going to gain a little bit of an advantage when I got to the PT track at Warrant Officer School. And so, but when I got to Warrant Officer School, I was praying to God. I'm like, I can't be on the limit, right? You don't want to train at the edge because you might fail if you have a bad day. So I showed up and I probably had one of the best times I've had in years. At that point, I ran it, 2.5 minutes faster that morning. That's not elevation. Maybe God just helped me to feel good about my situation by granting me like a gigantic buffer between success and failure, to the degree that I got picked for road guard because supposedly I could run fast, and it just earned me more work. But I guess good deeds don't go unpunished, but that's not a bad thing. Like those are all good problems to have because it only helped me get more repetitions in. And by the time it got to the end and it culminates in that giant road march from the field to back to garrison, you're running with your gear, you're running with the rucksack, you're setting the pace, and that was it. God answered my prayer as far as I could tell. You could say I did all the work, but it feels very much like God answered my prayer, and so that ties up the philosophy, right? You're born. Um, People try to convince you that you're lesser or that you're a victim or you're this and you're that, but you have the ability to make up your mind for yourself uh, to a degree. And once you realize that you can make up your mind in certain things, you can keep making up your mind to push yourself further and higher, forward and up, right? That's part of the philosophy in our lives. We want to look forward, we want to move forward, and we want to elevate. And in doing that, we don't just elevate ourselves and we don't just carry ourselves forward. If we're paying attention to the people that we love, we're trying to do the same for them. And I think that's the saddest part for me is that you can't carry everybody because not everybody wants to go. You know, you leave people behind not because we don't love them or we don't care, but because they're not ready. They don't want to. You can't carry everybody, but you try. I think we have a responsibility to try. And if we ask God, if we say our prayers, if we find that spiritual element that helps us to elevate to the next level, like improving our run from 16 minutes and 30 seconds to 14 minutes and 30 seconds, literally overnight. um that helps a lot. And if you want to take it out of the army context, I'll tell you like this. I was born in South Central Los Angeles, California, in one of the, I wish I could give you the zip code. I don't remember the zip code. Look up Lillian Street Elementary School. That's where I went to elementary, and it's poor, right? Like the homeless people are down the street, like quite literally. And you live in whatever, you live in a house, but it ain't the greatest house. And then as a teenager, I lived in the trailer park. I was one of the trailer park kids. But as a grown up, I was going through a life crisis, a divorce, and I had moved on. Finally, got past the divorce piece, but I was rebuilding my life, and I took it kind of hard. But one night, I was highly intoxicated, drunk, and I was standing in the middle of my kitchen, just kind of contemplating, and the island I use it as my workspace. So I was writing something, and I realized that I was in San Diego, California, in 2022, at the height of the housing market when everything was as expensive as it could be. I had relocated after a heartbreak and life catastrophe, but I was standing in the middle of the most expensive housing market in the country in my house that I had purchased with a job that was supporting all of this, including the house I left behind in Colorado that I was still paying for. Money isn't everything, but I'm just trying to illustrate that I knew at that moment that God was answering my prayers, and not everybody can use spirituality in that way, but I was doing my best to swing my hammer for good and use a chisel that God had given me for good. And I found myself there in my kitchen with the understanding that I had made it from South Central Los Angeles, literally around the world with deployments in the military, et cetera, et cetera. Endured heartbreak, had 3 kids, like had the whole ride, rode the roller coaster. And even though life was kicking my ass at the time, I was doing it. I was somewhere. I had my master's degree. I had my IT certs. Like again, these aren't everything, but you add them up, and it equates to a better life. And not only that, but the people that I love, that I care about, my children, the family that was supporting me, my friends who were coming to my rescue, they showed up because I was trying my best. Um, and and that's the way it works, man. You got to put your best foot forward. You can't let people convince you that you're a victim, that you can't get up off the couch, that those higher level jobs aren't available to you. They are. They're just going to take effort, and it takes time to get there. It's not going to be handed to you on a silver platter. You've heard all these things before. I'm not saying anything profound. Like this is all stuff you can find on any inspirational video on the internet. What I'm telling you is, like, I walk the walk, and I see young men and young people getting told that they're crippled. It's a fucking lie. You're absolutely capable. Um, there's the idea. Let's talk about something that might hit home. There's the idea that women don't want us. Bullshit. Women want a man who is taking care of himself, because that implies or signifies or is evidence that he can take care of her, and not just her, but a family. So if you're not working to take care of yourself, of course nobody's going to want you, because if you don't take responsibility for you, you can't take responsibility for anybody else. It begins with us. If you're taking good care of yourself, if you're working on your body and your mind, you don't have to be perfect. Look at this. I have a mess in here today. I shouldn't be on here. I don't even know how to speak sometimes, but I'm not gonna not do it. You gotta do it. You gotta move forward. You gotta improve yourself. You gotta become the type of person that people want. It works in that order. It doesn't seem fair. Life isn't fair. But if you're not gonna hire the guy who you don't know who can do shit. If the guy has a resume that says he can do X, Y, and Z, and he can produce a diploma, he's probably gonna get the job before you. If the guy shows up and he looks like a model, and you show up looking like a slob, it just implies that maybe he knows how to get up on time to get ready. It's really not complicated sometimes, but you have to help yourself. We have to help ourselves. And I refuse to let people convince you that you are some sort of victim. You are a man. The reason that God made men stronger than women is because he designed us to carry the load, to carry the load of responsibility, to carry the load of a family. It doesn't make us better, because our moms are the ones that teach us, the females, the women are the ones that teach us how to nurture, how to preserve life. Because there's a reason. It's an ecosystem. It's not a him and her. It's not a his or hers. It's not a us and them. It's an ecosystem of life. You can't do what you can't do one with out the other. I heard, let me be fair. I heard a woman say the other day, well, we don't need men. We can freeze our eggs and put the sperm in. Children need fathers. I know that I'll give credit to women. There are lots of quality single moms, and they raise great kids. But I will tell you, the vast majority of us need fathers, especially the boys, especially the boys. But a girl also needs a father, so she understands what a man is supposed to look like, how he's supposed to treat her. She needs an example of the man who will provide and protect and help grow a family. I don't think that's different, and I don't want to get in trouble for voicing an opinion like that, but who gives a shit? It's a it's a system. It's an ecosystem, and we have to contribute to it. And how do we contribute to it? By working on ourselves, by not letting anybody label us as toxic. And if we look at our darkness tears and we understand that somehow we become toxic, we're a drug dealer or harming others in some other fashion, a murderer, a, a pimp, a cult leader. Like if we're hurting others, then we're not doing it right. We're not that person that's contributing. We're absolutely sucking the soul out of this life. So do better. That's it. Pick up your hammer, pick up your chisel, sculpt good things, starting with yourself.